Springtime is swarm season for termites. Termites are a colony of insects. They live down deep in the ground, and they're a social insect. So you have one queen, and everyone knows about a termite queen, and you have one queen that lives down on the ground, and she's the reproductive force for the entire colony. Well, in order for that species to survive and to start new colonies, they allow swarmers or reproductives to be produced, and those reproductives at this time of year go up in the tubes and wait for the right climatic conditions, and then they come out. The nice thing about termite swarming is you might have termites that have attached themselves to your home, and they're working and eating the wood inside the walls, and you don't know it for a period of time because they are so sensitive to light and so sensitive to air. They normally will bring up dirt with them, and they stay inside the walls, and they don't want to come out. You're not going to walk in and see a termite walking across the floor, except for those reproductives. Those reproductives are produced to go out, and then they will come up on your wall. They will poke through the wall and make a little what's called a swarm castle. It's mud, and it looks like almost finger-like projections coming out of the wall. And when they come up into that swarm castle, then those swarmers jump off and go swarming out and go flying away. That's what a lot of homeowners see, and it's the first time they know they have a termite problem. People will call us and they've got a lot of different insects that they're looking at. When you're dealing with a termite, first of all, it's very much at a particular time of year. From late March through the end of April, even somewhat about midway through June, that's their peak swarming time in this area, in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. The difference between an ant and a termite, a swarming ant has a pinched-in waist, it has elbowed antennae, and it's got wings on it that are unequal. You've got one large pair of wings and one small pair of wings. When you're dealing with a termite, it's very different. There is no pinched-in waist. The sides of the body are parallel. The other thing is that their antennae do not elbow, they're straight. And they look like almost like a necklace of pearls, only it's black. The body is all solid black, and then the termites are in the order Isoptera, which means equal wing. That means that both of those pairs of wings are exactly the same length and size. So unequal wings for an ant, equal wings for a termite, pinched in waist for an ant, no pinched in waist on a termite, elbowed antennae for an ant, bead-like antennae or straight antennae for a termite. So those are the ways you can look for it. You can see the mud, you can see the evidence of it, or if you actually have the insect, you can look at that insect and determine what one you're dealing with. If you've got termites somewhere in your yard, somewhere in your fence, that doesn't mean that they're in your home. In the old days, when we used the repellent chemicals, we would say, let them have the fence, okay? If they eat the fence, at least they've got a food source and they're not eating on your home. In today's world, it's a little different with our non-repellent technologies that are out there. You may want to have that treated because we can use that as a window of opportunity into that colony and destroy that colony. The new termiticides that don't repel termites and they pick it up and share it and kill the colony. So it's not anything to really be concerned about. You don't look at termites in the fence or in the wood pile or something like that and think, oh my gosh, if they're there, they're also in my home. But you don't necessarily, in today's world, ignore that. You look at that and say, that's a way I could use to try to kill that colony of termites. And again, if they're in the fence, maybe they're not in the home. Usually they're not in the home, but it's a good idea to have your home inspected at that point. If you've got something anywhere on your property that you're concerned about and you're not sure what the identification of it is, call someone, get some help, have somebody come out and take a look at it, tell you, is my home in danger? If it's in danger, you got an easy way to take care of it these days. If you're building a home, there are some things that you can do at that particular moment in time to protect your home against termites. It's called a termite pretreatment. There's liquid termite pretreatments. You treat all of the soil and around the foundation before the slab is poured. And that's one way to take care of that problem. There are barrier methods. There's a method called Termi-Mesh, and Termi-Mesh is a stainless steel meshing that's installed around the pipes, and that's a great way to keep termites from being able to use that area to come into the home. There's another one that's called Impasse, and it's a same kind of a deal. It goes around all of the plumbing penetrations, but it is a plastic that's put there with a little pesticide embedded in the plastic. That's another good method that you can do. And lastly, as the home you're past that point, your foundation is laid, and you've got the wood studs coming up, you can treat all that wood with a simple product like boric acid. If boric acid is embedded into that wood is not a food source for those termites. So if you're building a home, you definitely need to take a look at it. There are things you can do right then that you can never really do again. So it's a good time if you're building to take care of those things and hopefully take that off your plate for a long, long period of time. When it comes to folks wanting to do pest control for themselves, I have no problem with that. I think that's fine. A lot of people like to do certain home projects by themselves. Some people mow their own grass. Some people have someone take care of the grass for them. Some people do their own home repairs. Other people don't trust themselves and want to have somebody come in. I think it's all really a matter of judgment and knowledge. You want to do some research into the habits and the biology of the insect. You want to make sure that you're identifying the insect properly. And if you can't do that, I mean, you can go to the web and get some information that'll help you. If need be, you can even send them to facilities like Texas A&M or your local pest control operator to make an identification for you. They'll help you out in doing that. So number one, you've got to identify the pest. You need to know a little bit about the pest so that you can treat it according to its biology and habits, so that you're working with it as opposed to against it. There are all kinds of pesticides and all kinds of non-chemical methods, and there's baits, and there's physical controls, there's cultural things that you can do, and you want to do a little bit of research because you do want to be able to use the right method for the right circumstance. There's a lot more to pest control than just putting a pesticide inside a container and spraying it around someone's home or spraying it around your own home. Do-it-yourselfers, I think, once you've gained these kind of knowledge, the knowledge about the insects, their biology and habits, the materials that you're wanting to use and what suits you best in your environment, and the application methods and the tools necessary to do the application properly, have no qualm with somebody who wants to do things themselves. You've got the woodworking man that loves to have his shop. Well, that person likes to make his own furniture, his own other materials, and he's got all the tools necessary. He's got a lot of training that he's gone through. He's been doing this for a number of years, and he knows what he's doing. If you and I just wanted to walk out there and try to create that table sitting over there, we wouldn't have the tools, we wouldn't have the knowledge, we wouldn't have the skill. We would be better off to buy a table from someone else. If you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the inclination to find out the information that you need in order to do the job right, I highly recommend that you let a professional take care of this. We are dealing with toxic materials. Most of the time when we're talking about doing pest control work, the materials that we use are designed to control or eliminate or kill pests. It's best left to having somebody like me who comes in, does our job, applies the right amount of materials to the right locations for the right pests, and then leaves. Fire ants were first in South Texas, and then they moved up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They've been here for probably a good 18 to 20 years. They've been here for a long time. They're well established. The problem with fire ants is that they are very aggressive. So I'm sure everyone's out there has kicked a mound of fire ants and watched them just boil out of that nest. That's something that is very disturbing when you watch that. If your hand's down in there, they are coming out to defend their colony, and fire ants are actually reproducing throughout the entire year. There isn't a particular time of year when fire ants are more active or less active. The mounds that you see are actually like a climate control device. Mounds can indicate a couple of things. First of all, if it's dry and it's hot outside, that mound has disappeared and they're down into the ground. And the colony is still there. They're still working. They're just coming up and trailing right across the top of the grass and going to where they're looking for food. That mound will come up a lot of times after rain because the water table's moving up and the ground is so moist, and they'll bring that up, and it's a cooling device. The air blowing through the top of that mound actually will cool down that colony. So it's something that you do see very frequently after a rain. Just because the mound goes down at other times of year doesn't mean the fire ants aren't there. It just means that they're not as visible to you. The problem with fire ants is they actually bite and sting. They first grab on with their mandibles and they pull up that skin and they're biting it, and then they swing their abdomen around and inject there and sting right there in that same exact spot. When they do that, they're actually injecting an acid under the skin. That's what makes the little pustule. It's called formic acid. And that little pustule is your skin reacting to it, and it itches real bad. And the other thing that's bad about fire ants is that they actually put out what's called an attack pheromone. If you've ever noticed, somebody might be standing in a fire ant mound, and all of a sudden they're not bit once, they're not stung just once, but they're bitten stung numerous times, all down their leg, and it's from their knee all the way down, or from their thigh all the way down. The reason is the fire ants have been moving and they're coming up that leg, and then one of them gets disturbed enough to do the biting and stinging, and when they do that, they emit a pheromone known as the attack pheromone, and when they do that, all the rest of them do the same thing. Fire ants are actually very dangerous if you don't get away from them or take care of them, do some treatment for them. It's not something we want in our playgrounds. It's not something we want at our schools. It's not something we want around our nursing homes. So those are areas that we do a lot of preventative treatment. It's not something that you wait until you have the problem, because it is such a health issue. So we do a lot of preventative treatment when it comes to fire ants. The good news about fire ant infestation is that fire ants are something that anybody can deal with. You can hire somebody to come and do that for you, or it is something that you can take care of by yourself. Texas A&M recommends the Texas two-step, I believe is what they call it. And the Texas two-step is, I'm going to treat that mound, and then I'm going to use a variety of baits over the entire yard. The baits that you use, the one thing that you do need to be very careful of is that it's a good fresh bait. If you go and it looks like it's been sitting on a shelf at the local hardware store or farm and market store for 6 months, the attractiveness of that bait can be gone. And if it's not attractive to them, they don't pick it up, it doesn't do anything. But as long as it's fresh, you can take a combination of baits, one that might have an adulticide that actually kills the insect, and another one that has an insect growth regulator that affects the reproductive capacity of the queen. And if you mix those two baits together and spread it over the entire yard, you're going to get good control. Killing the mounds are relatively simple. You can use, on the organic side, you can use things like diatomaceous earth or orange oil, any pesticide. Anything that you use to treat the top of that mound is either going to suppress or actually kill the mound. If you do that in combination with spreading the baits over the entire yard, you're going to get a really, really good control measure for the fire ants. Mosquitoes are definitely a hot topic. I mean, mosquitoes are one of those insects that no one liked before, but now that there's something to be afraid of, like West Nile virus, everyone really, really wants the mosquitoes gone from their home environment. You know, they are a blood-sucking insect. They do vector diseases. West Nile virus is just one of many, many malaria, dengue fever, several other diseases that are associated with mosquitoes. And they are a problem. They're also a nuisance pest. You know, a lot of people that want to spend a lot of time in their outdoor environments, their outdoor living environments. I mean, it used to be that your living room was the place that you spent time, and now people have kitchens and living rooms and swimming pools and all that kind of stuff outside in their patios. And when you go out there with your family and you're swatting mosquitoes all the time, it's something that becomes a real problem for you. So is the health concerns and the diseases that the mosquitoes can vector. In addition to that, though, is just the plain nuisance of not wanting to be out there and be eaten alive with mosquitoes. Any area that you can have water that pools and sits for a period of time is a potential breeding site for mosquitoes. So the first thing you want to do is control the water. Water your plants a little more often, a little less water, and get rid of the catch pan. West Nile virus is a real concern. West Nile virus is something that every year that has gone by since it was first discovered in the United States, there's been more and more and more cases. To horses, it's an equine virus. I mean, it affects the horses a lot more than it affects people. One of the things that the environmental folks or the people that do the mosquito control, they first look for mosquitoes, then they start watching the horses, they start watching the birds, and then they start looking for human cases. It doesn't survive terribly well in humans. In humans, if you get the virus, it is something that's serious. Your chances of getting the virus just by being outside or just because you swatted a mosquito that bit you are still pretty low. I think you're still pretty safe out there. I think mosquitoes are still more of a nuisance pest to us than necessarily a disease factor. If it gets to where it's like that, you will see, if we start seeing that either West Nile virus or some other disease starts getting more and more prevalent amongst the human population, you will start to see those mosquito-controlled districts really kicking up what they're doing, and you will see more and more pesticides be used. I think we're a long ways off from that, and it's not something that you need to be living in fear of getting West Nile virus and not going outside and enjoying the outdoors just because of that. When you're dealing with mosquitoes, cities, municipalities will frequently try to help with that, and what they do is they do a fogging. Fogging for mosquitoes has been around forever. They do it with planes, they do it with trucks, they do all kinds of things throughout different times of our history. Currently, what they'll still do is to use a fogging device, and they'll put it on the backside of a truck, and in the middle of the night they go driving down in between all the houses, and they're emitting a fog of an insecticide. That fog is designed to knock down those adult mosquitoes. Doesn't do anything for the ones that are breeding or the ones that the eggs that have been laid, but those adult mosquitoes do get knocked down. Problem is that in an area where you've got yards and everyone's going to the backyard, and we're now all back to back on our yards, now you're only getting a small portion of it by getting this street, and in between you've got 2 yards, 2 houses, 2 pools, 2 everything right there in the middle. A lot of people are very concerned about that. They don't like those pesticides being put out in the air in their neighborhood. But when you're dealing with a disease-carrying organism, we've got to take some kind of control measures. You'd have to get a community-wide kind of effort in order to try to get this house and this house and this house to all contribute and work about trying to keep mosquitoes from being able to breed anywhere. So it is possible, and it does work, but it is more difficult. Cockroaches are another species of insect that is kind of an old species of insect. They've found them in fossils that date back millions of years. So cockroaches and man have been together for a very, very long time. There's a number of species of cockroaches that we deal with in the area. The ones that are the biggest concern as far as our health goes are really the German cockroach, which are the ones that will live in your kitchen or in the kitchen of any kind of a kitchen around food, and they'll build large populations. As they go through their life, they have things that'll cause you a health concern. They do a fecal smear in a corner of a cabinet, and that fecal smear it has an aggregation pheromone. That aggregation pheromone tells other cockroaches this is an okay place to be, and all of a sudden you'll get a large population that builds in that cabinet area. The fecal smear, the exuvia, which is the old cast skins of the cockroaches, as they grow, they shed off their cast skins, or as they die, the insect body parts that crush up. Those little tiny things are actually found to be a serious allergy problem. They'll be airborne, and kids with asthma especially, are vastly affected when there's a high population of cockroaches. So those are things that you really do have to take more serious these days. When you're dealing with a cockroach, first of all, you want to make sure that you don't allow cockroaches to live and breed, especially like the German cockroaches, the little tan ones, the small ones with the little racing stripes. You want to make sure that if you see one of those in your house, it's time to take some action. You can deal with this on your own. There are baits you can buy, there are sprays you can buy, there are concentrates you can mix, or you can call a professional. In my opinion, a professional, we've been trained in the biology and habits, we've been trained in the proper use of the pesticides. We don't generally over-treat. When you look at the homeowner using pesticides, they always figure that if 1 glug's good, 2 glugs is better, or 1 ounce is good, let's use 10 ounces. If I'm gonna spray it down, I'm gonna spray down everything. No, we in the pest control field have been trained that you don't overuse pesticides. A cockroach wants to live, or will spend 75% of its life in a crack that it can touch its feet and its back at the same time. The other 25% of its life is spent looking for food or for reproduction or for sex. So 75% of the time, it's staying in that crack. If I've got materials that are in that crack, which is not where you and I are gonna spend any time, or our kids or our dogs or anything like that, then that's where the pesticide needs to be. The cockroach is gonna go back into that crack, it's gonna die. When someone has a problem with spiders around their home, our first inclination is let the spiders be. The spiders are good guys. They're out there eating other insects and capturing them, and they're actually a pretty decent control device. There are, however, some spiders that you do need to be concerned about and that you do need to make sure that you don't allow to be in your home environment. That'd be the black widow and the brown recluse. It used to be thought that you would die from a black widow bite. And if you've got allergies, if you're hypersensitive, a black widow bite can be deadly, but most of us don't have that problem. You will, however, get sick. It's going to make you at least nauseous. It's going to react in a manner that's going to affect your nervous system, and sometimes it'll cause muscular cramping. Those nerves will cause you to tense up, and it can be very, very painful. The brown recluse bite is what's called a necrotoxin, which means that it kills tissue. When you're bit by a brown recluse, your reaction is totally localized, but the skin that is there dies, and the body will slough it off. It's kind of a really nasty thing to go through. Depending on where you're bit, it can be something that can be disfiguring. The good news is that as long as you know that you've been bit and you get to a doctor quickly, a doctor can dose you with massive quantities of antibiotics, and it will fight off the reaction. When you're dealing with a spider bite, they have fangs. It's actually 2 modified legs up at the front by the head, and when they bite, then you've got 2 little tiny wounds. You might need a little magnifying glass to see it, but you'll be able to see that there are 2 puncture wounds. You see that and you start to see some kind of a localized reaction that's more than just a little tiny red spot, it's time to go see a doctor and take care of that. When you're dealing with trying to control these particular kinds of insects, there's a number of things you need to do. Number one, control their food source. So if you've got a good pest control program, you've got a regular service from somebody that's coming out to make sure that all the food sources, all the other insects are being kept down, and those spiders are going to be gone as well. So that's the first step. The next step is when you're dealing with a spider, if you see the spider, it's a physical control. You spray the spider with a pesticide, you step on it with your shoe, or you hit it with a hammer, and that spider's dead. So be careful when you're looking at them. Don't look at a spider and think, I'm gonna let that spider walk on me. But don't look at a spider and think, oh my gosh, every spider needs to die either, because there's so many other species of spider, and those other species do a good job for us and help us and control a lot of insects. So overall, I think spiders are good organisms out there and help us out. You just need to be concerned about those two.